Springboks thrashing Argentina to claim a first Rugby Championship win since 2019, and Australia at the bottom of the table for the second year running. Time for a reflection on the championship as a whole. Joining myself and the columnist to do that is a good friend of the podcast and one of Australia's all-time greats, David Campese. The Rugby Championship is done and dusted. The odds were not in Argentina's favour to spring an upset, as we sort of established last week. That is indeed how it played out. The Springboks were irresistible on Urban Etzebeth's record-breaking appearance, and they put nearly 50 past the runners-up in the Championship, Argentina. A great tournament from them. On the other hand, Australia have finished fourth in the Rugby Championship for the second year running. That one win being that 2019 win over Argentina. A British and Irish Lions tour less than a year away. Obviously, just as many questions to pose today to our special guests as post-Rugby World Cup. The first one, I suppose, would be, do we see an improvement over the tournament? We'll get to that. But joining us today is a good friend of ours and one of Australia's rugby greats, David Campese. How are you, David?
Evening, gentlemen. How are you going?
Evening,
We are very good, very good.
I'm trying to be polite. I'm trying to be English.
That was unusually polite.
Start as you don't mean to go on, David. Yeah.
I was going to say, let's see how long that lasts. Let's talk about South Africa first of all, very briefly, before we segue into Australia. Campo, they're deserved winners of the championship. I know you've been very impressed when they've turned it on. Your wife's South African, isn't she? So, well, how are you both feeling about how they've performed?
Yeah, look, we went to watch this test in Brisbane, and you know, I mean, they probably could have won by about 60 points easily. And I think there's a lot of credit's got to go to Russia Erasmus, because if you have a look at, there's something they sent to me, I'll send it to you later on, how many players they've got in every position. They can field 5 different teams easily. Yeah. You know, and it's quite interesting because, you know, the game of rugby, even though we went professional in 96, what they've done is, you know, rugby league players have had a big influence in our game, coaches and defence coaches. And I just think that Rusty's taken this to a new level. He's actually taken it to, you know, it's about tactics. Now, he's brought the bomb squad on, 2019 final of the World Cup. If you think about England lost their best prop in the first couple of minutes, I think it was Cole came on, and he's 30-something years old. I see he's still playing. And he had to last 60 minutes, but he was only playing 20 minutes per game. And then the second half, you bring out a fresh new scrum, mate, and that's where the penalties are made, you know. So it's very smart. I see a lot of the Kiwis complain, typical when they lose. Gatlin and all that complained about this. But that's what professionalism is. You've got to try and get the advantage. And, you know, I think also if you look at some of the players they're bringing through, they're absolutely amazing. You know, there's so many different varieties, so many different players. I think at number 10, they've got about 5 players. You know, you've got Colby, who's an absolute genius on the wing. It's great to see a small guy, you know, especially when he bounced off, who was it, Barrett in that game, you know. I mean, it's just the passion and I think mainly for them it's passion and history. And I think you can just see why they're playing for their country, because they love doing it. And I think that we've got to realise that even though rugby is a professional sport, you still got to love doing what you do when you play.
Let's segue straight into Australia, because I think that sort of sums it up pretty well. Last time you were on, Eddie Jones was having secret interviews with Japan, and obviously he was on his way out. It was, I think it was during Rugby World Cup. Would you rather be back then, or are you happier now with where Australia are at? Do you see the improvement that a lot of the media has seen over the, you know, I said yesterday to the guys when I was chatting, there's an 80-minute performance across the second half of the first All Blacks test and then the first half of the second test. Does that encourage you?
No, not really, because I don't believe we should have a Kiwi coach. I mean, it's like, you know, I was in New Zealand last week for the test, and they all said, oh, isn't Smith a good coach? I said, why? I said, what has he actually won? He hasn't won anything. Yes, he might have won in 6 nations, but a World Cup is the ultimate for any sports player or coach, and he hasn't won anything. And we always seem to get a coach that's never won anything. We always seem to get the second best Kiwi coach, never the first best. But even I must admit, the Kiwis are not anywhere near where they should be. I mean, they're a very ordinary team at the moment, even though they beat us last week. But Joe Smith's got no idea about our culture or history. We're mauling the ball from 22 metres out. We don't do that. That's not Australian rugby. We're used to counter-attack and attack from anywhere. We can't even do that. And I just think it's very, very sad that we have to go through this again with another Kiwi coach.
Do you think that Aussie coach,
yep.
Campo? Do you think Aussie coach? Do you think that there's an Aussie coach who
no? Well, that's our problem. I mean, I spoke to Phil Wall early on this year, and I said, mate, dude, the most important thing is don't panic and just go and get whoever's available. And Joe Smith was the only coach available. Then he brings his old scrum coach across, so he's brought the whole of New Zealand across to coach us. He's not interested to learn our way. He wants to play Smith's way, and the rumours were, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but the Irish players didn't like Smith towards the end. That's what I heard. I could be wrong, but last week, I mean, it's a great indication. We had a guy called Ben Donaldson, who I think is a very good number 10, on the bench. They took off the winger Peachy, who I thought was doing okay. They brought a centre on to put on the wing. Our centre got injured. They brought Donaldson on the wing. And the poor kid's lost. What is he doing? He's a number 10, one of the best number 10s, I think, in Australia. And yet he's on the wing, not knowing what the hell to do. And it's just bizarre. I don't think we've had the same combination for any test so far. We change players left, right and centre. And as you know, 9 and 10 are the generals of the game. And I just don't think that we've got the skills to play at that high level at the moment.
The thing that concerns me, and as you can tell by my shape, I was not a back. But when I think of the great Wallaby sides, I think the word great is overused. But the mid-80s side, the side that came off the back of winning the World Cup when it had that little bit more experience about it, and the side that won in 99, they were absolutely magnificent sides. But even if you look at the Wallaby sides just below that level, you look at them from 9 to 15, and they had threats, genuine threats, all over the place. They had some magnificent players. I don't think I've ever seen a Wallaby backline from 9 to 15 more anonymous than this one.
Yeah, look, I think what's happened is we've had a lot, I don't think Eddie really helped. And in a way, I feel sorry because I played rugby with Randwick with Eddie and Czech and Bob Dwyer and the Ellers and Boydovan and all other great players. I think he was thrown in the deep end a bit. He came out to Australia in January last year, went to his old school and said, we're going to run the ball like the Ellers. A month later, he said, no, running rugby's dead in Australia. We're going to kick the ball away. Because no one actually, I would have actually said, give me some coaches and some players and just let me see where we are. And, but also, I mean, the way he treated the journalists was not great at the airport. But again, the other problem is our journalists, mate, they just write everything what Rugby Australia wants them to write, Before the first All Black test was about James Slipper, breaking George Gregan's record. I mean, Slip's he's a great player, but he's never really done much. But the focus was not on the team, and after we did this and that. I mean, can you imagine like the Growdens and the Jenkins and all those, mate? They would have absolutely ripped into this team. But the commentators on TV, the same, mate. They're all paid by Rugby Australia. They work for them, and they're never going to say anything bad. And that's people. But the problem is the people out there are not stupid. The average rugby supporter, who's probably 40, 50 and 60 now, they're not dumb. They know what the game's about. And it is very frustrating, especially what you mentioned about some of the teams in the 80s. This year's our 40th year of the Grand Slam. And then no one in Australia knows anything what happened 40 years ago.
Is that side sort of lost in the mist of time now in Australia?
No, mate, there's another great guy you guys probably don't know. Have you ever heard of a guy called Greg Cornelson?
Yeah.
Now, what did he do?
He
scored. But he the bloke who got 4 tries at number 8?
Okay.
Against the All Blacks?
Against the All Blacks at Eden Park in 1978.
Yeah.
That's going some, isn't it?
Do you think anyone in Australia knows who he is? No. Half the people don't even know who I am because they don't watch the game. and our history is gone. And that's the problem. That's where I just talked before about Russie. Russie's brought that history and culture back. He wants the players to play for their country and their families and friends and all that, and that's because he's been there, done that. He's seen everything. But also the interesting fact at the moment is you look at Robinson, Kiwi coach, played for New Zealand. Russie played for South Africa. Borthwick played for England. Townsend played for Scotland.
Yeah.
And the French coach played for France.
Yeah.
And we've got Joe Smith. Yeah. We need people, but for some reason in Australia, they don't want coaches. We've got all these other sports. We've got rugby league and Aussie rules, and they bring all the old guys back to help. But in rugby union, no, mate, sorry. So they've got like 30-year-olds who have never played any high level, and at the coaching area that don't know what to coach.
You seem to have a lot in common with Wales, David, in the state scene. I mean, there are no homegrown coaches who are really pressing to take on the national side.
Well, I mean, I've spoken to Mark Ring and guys like that. He can't get a job. And the reason is because they're flair. The people I know in the world, like you look at Danny Cipriani, can't do anything. Serevi can't get a job. You've got Mark Ring, you've got myself, because we're different. We're going to probably run the ball from the dressing room. But I'm just saying they just don't like people who are different. They want to play. It's like the IRB, mate, the old board. Can you believe that JJ Jeffrey's own country didn't vote for him? That's disgraceful. That's disgraceful. I'm sorry. I know JJ. I'll tell you a story about JJ. Interesting. In 1984, we played Scotland last, and we're in Edinburgh. Anyway, it's about 8 o'clock in the morning. I walked outside, and there's JJ sweeping the gutter. He's pissed as a fart. He's sweeping around. So every time I see him, I said, mate, do the IRB know what you did when you were playing? He's sweeping the gutter in the 80s. It was funny. But that's the characters you need. That's the characters, mate. Professionalism, an interesting word because, professionalism is, for a lot of people, is money. I've looked at professionalism as your attitude. As an amateur, I was professional, because I loved the game. I wanted to get better. I went to Italy and I was playing number 10 against Michael Liner, Joel Stransky, Nas Boita, and Frano Bodica. Then I would go back to the wing and I knew exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
Because
did
I wanted
you go
to
back to the wing because number 10 was too easy?
Yeah, mate, had to tackle more there. So it's just interesting that where we've come now, and especially in Australia, like the World Cup last year was a total debacle. I mean, we went over budget by about 4 point something million, and there's no report being handed out to anybody. It's a secret.
Yeah.
Well, we've all been there.
Yeah, true. It's not good, but I mean, I know for a fact that one of the board members' main concern was that we didn't have a war cry.
Wow.
And we've got no money. We're broke. We're broke now. So World Rugby own us. We've got no money.
Yeah.
So, we've got somebody who's picking all our coaches for us. We've got Mike Cat coming out to coach the Waratahs. No idea about Australian rugby, but he's coming out. I mean, it's just a debacle, mate.
Campo, the thing about it is that the Lions is being held up as one of the game's cash cows and is looking at a significant amount of money. I think it's over 70 million, something like that the Australian Union will get out of it. But the concern with it is, I mean, I know that the Lions have gone on tour and sometimes not been as competitive as they ought to have been, certainly back in the amateur era. They got a few dustings, but in a professional era, and particularly with the competition that you've got in Australia from the NRL, from Aussie rules, and from football, they can't afford not to be competitive in this series. Do you think that they will be competitive in this series?
Look, I think that what you said is spot on. I mean, but the thing is, we've always had competition from rugby league and Aussie rules, even when I was playing. But the thing is, the factor was we entertain people. And people have got to understand, sport's about entertaining. You don't entertain, people won't come. And we got to, I come from a little small town called Queanbeyan down near Canberra. And in 86, I went to Sydney, drove around Sydney, and every kid had a rugby league jersey on. 91 World Cup, went around town, every kid had a rugby union jersey on because we entertained people. That's all you have to do. You have to get out there and just go for it. And if you're entertained and you play the, I mean, I think we went for an era, we must have been 5 or 6 years. We didn't really have too many changes in the team, and the most important thing, as you know, at that level is the combination wise. If you play together week in, week out, you're actually gonna start to click one day. And that's what I was saying about Joe Smith. He's picked a different number for 9 and 10 every week, and it doesn't really help us because some of the players, if you watch, they just get a bit confused. What the hell's happening?
I think you make a great point there, Campo. And I always think Australia make a little bit too much of this, but we're the only the fourth sport in Australia, which is true. But you overcame it. I've just been doing a bit on Argentina this week, and it's a country I've toured. If you go to Buenos Aires, the first 44 pages of a 48-page sports supplement are football, and the next two are basketball, and you'll have 2 pages at the back, and that'll be tennis, F1, hockey, and rugby. Rugby has got no bigger foothold in Argentina than it has in Australia, but I think, and they've realised, we've got to generate a bit of excitement, and they are a good team to watch now, the Pumas, when they turn it on. So other successful teams survive in countries where the sport of rugby is not that big.
Well, look at Italy now. I mean, even look at the Olympic Games. I couldn't believe the amount of Italian sprinters and swimmers. I mean, I went to
cycling with them, of course, football as well.
Yeah, but I went to Italy in the 80s after the Grand Slam. I spent 6 months there, 6 months in Australia for 10 years. Because rugby was pretty dominant down back then. And look where they are now. It's just experience. Just they wanted to learn. And I think that's what's. I mean, when you got knowledge, I mean, what you're supposed to pass on knowledge. But, in Australia here, like I went to Argentina in 1983. It took us 35 hours to get there, but we went there. And, Hugo Portas invited me. Mate, we had a packed stadium back then. So rugby is known, but it's just not at the calibre. It's a very different sport now, and then beating the All Blacks. But if you look at most stadiums where they play, there's a lot of Argentine supporters, and they travel. So it's really about the passion. And obviously, again, like in Australia, it's a private school sport. And one of the biggest problems we have is that there's a lot of talent in the government schools, but we're not allowed to really get them because rugby league are the ones who come along and take all our players. But the thing is, at the moment, we're not offering anything. Instead of saying, guys, listen, go to the Commonwealth Games or Olympic Games, win a gold medal. We're the best footballer in the world. If you win a rugby league grand final, you're the best footballer in Australia. So it's a bit of a different ringtone, but they can go anywhere now and play any sport. So there's options, but again, we need to entertain. But again, the problem in Australia, there's no knowledge being passed down to any kid at all.
And when you talk about the South Africans having teams running 5 deep in the Springboks, I mean, have the Australians got even 2 deep?
No. Well, as I said, like for me, system is out here. You play for your club rugby juniors, then you come and play for your rugby seniors. You play for your states, then you play for your country. That's the system. There's guys that have to leave. Again, it's the coaches that are the problem. The coaches come in and say, "I don't like that number 10. Can you get someone else?" Then that number 10 goes over somewhere else and plays really well. And it's think, well, hold it, it's the coach or the player? But when you're born in one state, I mean, it's a very frustrating thing. And again, if you haven't got the combinations at that top level, we've got a couple of players playing Japan are coming back, and you can see they're not with it at the moment. The Korobetti's a good winger, but he was lazy as anything. He's been in Japan for 2 years now, and you can just see he doesn't work off the ball. But again, I'm a hard critic of a winger because that's what my job was.
Do you think, David, that we look at last week's game, and you're dead right about the All Blacks. I think they're nowhere near finding the best of themselves at the moment. They're in a state of flux. In by New Zealand terms, quite unstable actually in terms of selection. But when you look at those 2 starting lineups, leaving aside Fraser McWright, who I think if he was a Kiwi, he'd be in the All Black side now. Can you think of another starting Wallaby who would have been in that All Black side?
Nope.
That's scary.
No one.
That's scary, actually.
Well, I mean, that's where we are.
Yeah.
You know, again, you know, we've got a prop that's worth $1 million who plays 30 minutes of rugby. I wish I could do that because I'll be come back and put my head in the scrum. That's ridiculous. You know, there we had Michael Hooper last year go missing for 6 months and no one knew why. It's like this massive secret.
Yeah.
You know, and he was the Wallaby captain. Can you imagine Khaleesi gone missing for 6 months? Mate, the whole country would be in an uproar. You know, so there's definitely a problem. But the problem is it's always off the field. It's not on the fields. Shit always happens off. And the problem is that we've got, you know, there's no knowledge. There's no knowledge allowed to be brought back. You know, when was the last time you saw an offload in a tackle? You know, Bob Dwyer, if you want to speak to Bob Dwyer, I spoke to him this morning. He said, mate, he said, these guys can't catch and pass. I said, I know, Bob. That was our trait. You know, and he was a very successful coach and he coached in Leicester as well. But he's the same. He said, I can't watch it. You know, he watches 4 minutes of rugby.
Really?
You know, and there's an advisory guys like Dick Marks, who was a guy who was around when I played. He did all the coaching in Australia. He's just pulling his hair out. Everyone rings him and said, mate, what's the story? You know, but the board is still there and they're just doing what they want to do. They're not interested in learning. They're not interested in trying to find out what the problems are. And, you know, then you've got coaches I know that have been doing stuff with, you know, official coaching clinics. And he said the coaching is disgusting. It's shocking, you know. And you sit there and I watch games and no one can pass. It's all about them. All they want to do is run over people.
But you've got guys in there. You know, you've got Daniel Herbert now. You've got Phil Waugh and commentator. You've got Tim Horan. You know, these guys presumably. I mean, they have come out of successful Wallabies. So you know what it takes. You know, what is it that they're unable to give the leadership because the whole thing's in a sort of stasis. And there are other people who are playing politics and blocking their ability to make the changes that need to be made.
Well, it'd be interesting because, you know, McLennan, who was the chairman last year, left. He got sacked. You can't tell me the board didn't know what he was doing. You know, for all that money, like I said, we're 4-point-something million over budget. You know, I mean, we haven't got the money and we didn't even get the quarterfinals. So again, you know, look, you know, it's very hard because no one seems to know what the hell's happening. You know, you talk about Tim Horan. Tim Horan's a great player, but he doesn't do any coaching. He does nothing. He just gets on TV and talks. John Neal's the same. They're more of the corporate. No one coaches. So there's no knowledge being put back.
You play with some great. You played it under, if that's the right word, some great coaches. You know, Alan Jones, Dwyer. I mean, they were masters of the art. How important was that a one-man show, or was there a senior player group around those guys that were absolutely at the heart of the decision making, of the conversation about how you were going to approach this game or this tour? How important were the top players in establishing the tone of the various Wallaby sides that you played in?
Well, remember, I walked in the turn. I was 19 years old. You know, still drinking orange juice in 1982. Clueless, had no idea what I was doing. You know, you had Andrew Slack, you had Mark Ella, Gary Ella, Glenn Ella, you had Poitevin. That was the nucleus of the side. So we went from that side, 82, right through to 91. It's not bad, you know. Some of the guys moved on. But again, you know, as I said, I think if you look over that 10 years, you probably find that there would have been about probably 10 new caps. You know, in those days, remember, we was the top. You were the best 15 in the country. You don't come off. You had 2 reserves.
Yeah.
Because if you came off and the guy did well, you weren't seen again. So nobody came off. You know, it was 80 minutes. So that's why now, as I said, you've got a prop in Australia's plays 30 minutes. That's all he's worth. And then someone else comes on. You know, they just don't go that 80 minutes anymore. And as I said, with Coles in the World Cup 91, he wasn't used to playing 60 minutes. That's why the scrum was not good. So now the coaches say, okay, you go on here, you go on there. The thing that annoys me about rugby at halftime, you run out a minute later, then they swap props. It basically goes on for a minute. So obviously, I don't know why, but I mean, you let the players, because if you think about 80 minutes of rugby, that's when the fatigue hits, is that last 5 or 10 minutes, and it's not happening anymore because, South Africa bring a whole new scrum on.
It's interesting because dear old Brian Ashton, a lifelong coach, either in the amateur days when he was a teacher or full-time coaching, would now say quite openly, a lot of what I've thought all my life was wrong because this game's completely overcoached.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know Brian. Brian did a clinic out here a couple of years ago, and he was coaching the coaches. And what part of the deal was, we had, like, Matt Burke was there, I was there, so I would come and talk about wingers. So I saw Brian, I said, I'm going to do something very different today. He looked at me and just laughed. So I got up there and said, okay, guys, ask me questions. I'm not telling you a bloody thing. Ask me what you want to know. Because that's how they're going to learn. What's use telling you something? You write it all down. Thank you, mate. Great. So Brian, I keep in contact with him. He just loves it. That's what you got to do, mate. You can't go in there and tell them everything, because what the hell are they going to learn? Nothing.
It's interesting that
Schmidt's reputation is as a real micromanager, as a real technocrat.
Oh, the playbook is endless, Joe. The players can't absorb it all.
Well, I think also, if you watch the players, at the game, I mean, you got half the field, there's no one there, and they keep on going one way because they're all watching the ball. The whole idea in front was look in front. Well, the thing that really I don't understand is, pardon me, is that you get to the 22 and there's a ruck on the far side. Number 10 gets it, kicks across to the wing and scores in the corner, and the guy's winger is actually leaning against the goalpost. You know what I mean? He's not actually watching his man. He's watching where the ball is. My job when I played is wherever you went, I went. But they haven't been taught that because of rugby league, And the other thing we're going to say is, it's great to win World Cups, So we were the first country to win 2 Rugby World Cups. But the problem was in '99, I thought, this is just me, I thought Rod McQueen destroyed the game. Even though we won, after that we went backwards. Because that was very, very structured back line as well. Because I think I went to watch Australia versus America. I think it was in Ireland in that World Cup '99. And Australia had 4v2 in their 22 and couldn't score.
With those players?
And it was Tim Hallwer and Jason Little.
Joe Roll.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, but that's the start. Because after they went, everybody wanted a Stevie Larkham.
Yeah.
They will panic. We haven't got a step. I said, hold it. Well, we had Mark Ella. People move on. Yeah. But the thing is, if you're not giving these kids the knowledge or understanding, I mean, of course you're going to struggle.
Do you think this is what we've seen with this group? Is obviously in terms of the squads during the Rugby Championship, I could name you 10 names that were in that under-20s team that came runner-up in the world, the under-20s championship in 2019. Angus Bell's an example. Ben Donaldson's an example. Lola Sio's an example. Matt Wright's an example. Do you think their sort of free spirit has been, sort of
definitely
squashed? You think that's what's happened?
Well, if you look at our under-20s this year, we didn't even get the quarters again. And then the coach gets another job somewhere else.
But what's had to happen for that 2019 side to obviously then, go from a potentially world-beating side and maybe not a golden generation, but one with as much potential as, that 2015 side to what we see now?
Well, I just think that, we was the same when I started in '82. 11 Wallabies pulled out of New Zealand tour, so we had 11 young guys go across. Steve Tyneman, Jeff Miller, Tommy Lawson, that was all myself. There was Ross Hanley, all Wallabies. They were all ended up playing for Australia. And that was because we won. There was no World Championship back then, but we beat New Zealand. That was a big game. South Africa wasn't around. But even it's just coaches are picked. I don't know what I know because they're a mate of a mate. I don't know. Nathan Gray, who's the coach now, he's been in the system for about 5 or 6 years. And I remember the World Cup 2019, I sat with Scott Johnson and I said about, what about Nathan? Oh, mate, no, he's been in the system. We spent all this money. We're going to keep him. And the thing is, they're still going on, but they're not winning. The whole idea to me is you've got to win. That's who we are. You can't keep on failing, then go off somewhere else to another job. At the moment, there's a circle. In football and rugby, there's a circle. You lose a job, you get in there, you get spat out somewhere else. Football's the same. You're a bad coach, you go in there, you get another job. Yeah. It's the same guys.
We've spoken, David, about the rugby league predominance, for want of a better word, in Australia. Just going back to South Africa for a minute, there are 20 reasons why they're as good as they are at the moment, but could one of them be that they're largely untouched by rugby league theology?
Yeah, well, the thing is, there's no rugby league over there. I mean, I coached the Sharks in 2004. There was the back line with Ruben Pienaar, Butch James, Brad Barrett, who ended up playing for England, Waylon Murray, J.P. Peterson, Francis Dane, Percy Montgomery, Nodwa Ngani. You had John Smith and you had Bismarck du Plessis there. So that's the team. We went from last to first in 3 years, but that was a nucleus of the side going through the system. It comes in bunches, but again, the problem is that, Dick Muir was the coach. He was a very free spirit coach. Yeah. And, we haven't got that here. We've got Kiwi coaches, and it's the philosophy he wants to put on us. We are not them.
Do you think the Kiwis are paying those coaches to make you rubbish?
Well, we had a lady who was the CEO and a guy who was the CEO of the Waratahs who got rid of Israel Folau. We had Robbie Deans back in the day, and then you had, who knows, mate? Conspiracies.
I meant it as a joke, but you make a very good point, David.
Really? Yeah. I didn't know. It looked like you were really serious, yeah. No,
we can
look,
never tell when Chewie's joking.
I just think the problem is that to be competitive, and as I said, there's not one foreign coach has won a Rugby World Cup with a team. So there we are. So that's the proof in the pudding, isn't it?
Yeah.
People who won World Cups.
Born in Wales.
Sorry, what's that?
Clive Woodward was born in Wales. Or did he go to school in Wales?
He went to school in Wales now.
There we go.
Well,
but no, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
But didn't Martin Johnson tell him to piss off after the game? So maybe we don't want you here for the next 20 minutes.
Depends who you speak to.
Yeah.
Sorry, Campo. I know. Obviously, we don't want to keep you too much longer on your Wednesday evening. We opened the Lions door very, very briefly. I'd sort of like to keep my foot in that door.
Yep.
What do you make then of the narrative, both among British media and Southern Hemisphere media, actually, about Australia not providing credible opposition? And I think that it comes from us because we need a good tour. The South Africa 2021 tour, we've said on this podcast probably a dozen times, was a non-event. And you speak about belief and fan base, and obviously the Lions is as good as it gets for us, and we kind of need to restore that. A 50-0, a 3-test series of 3 50-0 drubbings, may it be that, would not be what we need. Do you think that's a fair worry on our part?
Yeah. I think that what you've got to understand also is, that it's for these players to have a new coach trying to get them to understand what he wants is going to take a while. But after every game he says, we're doing this, we're doing that. But I mean, we scored the first try on Saturday in Wellington. The All Blacks haven't won there for 5 years. And it was like when I was working with Stan about 2 years ago, I think it was, 21, I think it was. And it was a week after we won the World Cup in 1991. And I was on the Oval and I said, I hope the Wallabies realise today what significance this was 31 years ago. And it was a shocking game, And again, if you haven't got culture and history, it doesn't matter what you got, really. It's in a business. If you haven't got culture and history, you got nothing. And I looked at the crowd on Saturday night there, and I reckon there would have been probably about 100 Wallaby supporters. Normally, you get a lot of support, especially in New Zealand, So it just shows you, and it's very, very sad. But what can you do? It's just sad that we are like this. And I actually said if we didn't have the Lions next year or the World Cup, there'd be no rugby in Australia in 3 years.
What is discussion about the Lions in Australia at the moment? Is there excitement around the tour at all, just publicly?
Oh, look, I think they sold tickets out a couple of weeks ago. They sold, went out and they lasted about 5 minutes, But again, I think we'll be competitive. It's another year. I think this tour away might gel a few people. But again, you still got to have the players next year turn up again. And if you think about now, these guys it is what they train like, every single day. It's like 9 to 5.
Yeah.
It's like going to work. You've got to have a day off. I mean, we did it because we actually loved it. Then you go and have a job. So our fun time was rugby. You go to training, you have a bit of fun. Now these guys, you look at their faces, they make a mistake, and it's another job. But on the other hand, you've got the All Blacks who are nowhere near where they should be either. They've lost a lot of experienced players. They're nowhere near where they should be as well. So,
yeah,
it's quite interesting.
Self-inflicted wounds as well, though, isn't it? I was thinking it's barely 2 years ago that like an Aussie second team came up here and should have beaten Ireland under Dave Rennie. And nobody seemed to be switched on enough to realise that team was actually playing all right. And if you stuck with it, and if you stuck with Rennie, Australia would be in a much better place. I mean, I don't know what causes knee-jerk reactions like that and panic to get Eddie Jones in. Rennie was doing a perfectly decent job.
Yeah, look, again, Dave Rennie came out to Australia. He didn't want to play Australian rugby. He wanted to play Dave Rennie's rugby. And that's what I've said before. Foreign coaches don't work. If you come out here and, I mean, I think it was Sir Graham Henry, I think it was, who went to the Lions in South Africa, and I think it was him. I'm not sure. I might be wrong there. But apparently, first thing he did, went to the library, got all the books about Lions rugby, and he read what it was about. So he knew why he was coaching there. These coaches turn up with the whole group. Okay, guys, this is how we're going to play. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. They don't want to learn who we are, why we won 2 World Cups. They just want to do what they want to do, and that's why they fail.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting. I mean, I'm just going to sort of segue as naturally as I can into we speak about competitive spirit, and one story that's been in the news this week. In Johnny Sexton's autobiography, this full exchange with Rieko Ioane post that quarterfinal came out. Campo, I wondered what you made of it and whether you think there needs to actually be a little bit more of that in the game, because obviously both of it seems to be, passion fueled on both sides.
I didn't. What happened? I didn't read the book. I can't read. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Don't worry. Chewy, did you read about it? Maybe.
No, I can't read either.
Oh, fine. God, has no one seen this?
I saw a headline, but I didn't get around to reading the story. No.
Oh, fine. Okay. Well, no, it was
the younger generation get themselves to gossip.
So what happened? Just quickly.
It was post Rugby World Cup quarterfinal, and obviously the All Blacks had won. Johnny Sexton's Ireland career had finished, and Rieko Ioane turns to Johnny Sexton and goes, "Enjoy the flight home. See you next Tuesday." Then it leads to this massive spat between Sexton and Ioane at the end of the game, and no one was really sure what was said. And now in Sexton's autobiography, he sort of detailed the account of what happened. Obviously, some people have come for Ioane's head over it, saying, it's disrespectful to say that. Some people have said, well, Sexton was always a spiky character. What goes around comes around. It's probably been blown out of proportion, and maybe I'm contributing to that, but I just wanted to get your view on it, Campo.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, in the heat of the battle, mate, things have been said. There's been fights, there's been everything. And after the game, you get on with it. You're mates and off you go. I think there's a book called Legacy. Have you read the book about the All Blacks?
Yeah.
And it says if you're a dickhead, you'll never play for the All Blacks. I'll just leave it there. No, I'm just saying that's their book. It's not me. You read the book and that's what it says. That was their traditions, and look, there's always things being said after games. I mean, So what? Really? Yeah. I mean, Saxon's been given, the last 2 years I've been watching, he absolutely rips into the referees on the field. He is just not a rugby player. I watched when they came out to Australia and he was just mouthing off to everybody. And mate, as I said, what comes around goes around.
Yeah.
What goes around comes around. Same thing. But I mean, look, it's pretty sad when he's retired and he's written a book, and that's what people are going to remember him by. You just got to suck it up and move on. And I've got to go to Ireland this year too, so I don't know how I'm going to be welcome now. Thanks.
I did read a bit along the line of that story saying the trouble is that everybody in Ireland thinks they're Roy Keane, everybody on the sporting world anyway, because they only had one big hero in the 90s. God, I'm going to get shot for that. But everybody modelled themselves spiky, vitriolic, hard man Roy Keane. And Johnny, there's definitely a bit of Johnny Sexton, Roy Keane and Johnny Sexton.
But see, the other thing for me is, I mean, have a look at Ireland last year. Them and French were the best teams in the world. So why'd they fail? Because Ireland cannot change the way they play. They beat New Zealand out here 2 years ago. Okay. And then what happened last year? The All Blacks changed their style. And the thing is, Andy Farrell's a rugby league player and it's very structured. Yeah. It's structure. And that's why even in the World Cup 2019, I was at the London airport and they were playing Japan. And I think Japan were up 20 points with 60 minutes gone. And what do you think Ireland did for the next 20 minutes to win a game? They did exactly the same they were playing for the first 60 minutes because they can't change. Rugby used to, I mean, I remember when the French used to run the ball behind the England goal line in Cabrera, I think it was, back in the day. That's how rugby was. But then this professionalism came, and I must, I've read a book on a wing and a prayer back. I didn't write a journal, I did, back in '91, and I actually said if we go professional, it'll destroy the game. And I said it again in 2003, and here we are, and we've still got problems. And you've got the IRB, changing the rules every week. Why do we change? Well, why do we have a goal line dropout?
Yeah.
Now we've got a 50-20, a 20-50 rule. I mean, really, it's just bizarre. We had a fantastic game, and now you've got these guys getting medals for wearing a suit in a bunker after the World Cup. They get a World Cup medal before the players get. I mean, the TMO people. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
I didn't know that.
Didn't you know that?
No, I didn't.
Have a look, and it's like going to the Olympic Games. The referees all get notified when they run out. Have you seen the World Cup and the Olympic Games? All the referees get mentioned as they run out. I'm going, really? You don't see football. You don't see, but I mean, it's just that's what I mean. What is professionalism to these guys? To the board, what is professionalism?
Yeah.
Professionalism is about attitude. It's about entertaining, and you want people to come and enjoy the game. I mean, we're watching. My son Jason's been watching the English Premiership. Michael Check is over there with Leicester. Some of that rugby is unbelievable. It's definitely changed, and that's what you need to do. You need to change and find the football that you guys want to play, not like everyone else. The French changed because finally, after many years, they broke away from this 3-1-3 system. And that all came out of New Zealand, and we're still doing it.
Yeah.
It does not work,
We should think about wrapping up, Campo. I want one sort of speculative prediction from you. That is obviously your fixtures in the autumn in November. You've got us, first of all, November 9th.
Yeah.
Following weekend, you've got Wales, then you've got Scotland, then you've got Ireland. How many results do you see your boys getting from those games?
Well, they're actually doing the rehearsal of the Grand Slam 1984. So we did it in 18 games. They're doing it in 4 weekends. So
and
we
how many
played
of those?
Tuesday, Saturday. We played for 18 games, trained every day. We got 20 quid a day from the IRB. And I think we lost 2 or 3 games.
Okay. All right. And how many are you losing this time around?
Look, I hope they do really well. Honestly, I mean, we need to show that we can do it. But again, I just don't know at the moment what the squad is. There's rumours that certain players won't be picked, which would be very devastating. And again, it's different style of rugby over there. Who knows what we played Wales this year? Everyone's rebuilding.
Yeah.
And I just think England's played pretty well against New Zealand. I think Smith's a very good player at 10. He's the live spark of the team. But again, you need the combinations. You've got the forwards. Look, I think they'll probably win probably 2 out of 4.
Okay. All right. I won't ask.
I won't mention which ones.
No, I was going to say, I think I can guess one of them, but I'm not even going to say that just because I think we've pissed enough people off today, probably.
Yes, I think so. Thank you.
Oh, let's just say Wales and Scotland and I'm done with it.
How do you know I reckon them? Could be England Islands. Could be England Islands.
I hear voices.
Oh, do you? Okay. Right.
Let's leave it to the imagination, except if you're Chewy, who has just laid his cards clear for everyone to see.
Yeah,
but I'm not on social media, so
he doesn't read the comment section. Guys, if you're going to go for anyone, go for him. Campo and I are more social media savvy, so please don't go for us.
Okay.
Campo, it's always great to see you. It'll be lovely to catch up around the England-Australia game. You are in London, aren't you? I think I'm right in saying.
Yes, I'll be over. But also, I've just started my own podcast, Uncut and Uncensored. So
yes,
I've spoken to Michael Checker last week. I've got Gordon Bray on his Immortal book, great commentator. I spoke to Joel Stransky and John Kerwin. So you have a listen.
Great platform. Have a listen.
Well, we'll come on yours whenever you want, David.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we'll do. Okay, as long as you've got something nice to say, huh?
No, of course. If you want pissed off listeners, we're the ones to go to.
Well, we'll join the club. Perfect.
Great to see you, Campo.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, Campo.
Enjoy.
Cheers,
mate.
Thanks for listening to this week's edition of the Rugby Paper Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on whichever podcast platform you use and recommend the show to your friends. The Rugby Paper is available to buy every Sunday, and to make sure you don't miss it, subscribe through our print, digital and online options at therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions. That's therugbypaper.co.uk/subscriptions to get all our content for as little as 14p per day.